Welcome back, guys. I'm Sadie, and if you've been watching my channel recently, you know that I built a floating deck and then I built some DIY lounge chairs to go on it. And since I've done that, it has been my favorite place to hang out. It's the new go-to place, but I think it's missing something. I'm thinking workstation, game table, drink tray. So I got a couple pieces of cedar here. Let's get started building and see what we come up with. A big thank you to Cabot for sponsoring this video. Like most projects, this one's starting over at the miter saw. Still haven't made my new miter saw station, but it's working. And over there I'm just getting the 4 side pieces cut out, and then I'm going to grab my trim router. Oh, didn't I mention that I am loving my Levrack system? It keeps everything so organized. I'll have a future video coming up with more details on installing it and an overview of my shop. So right here I'm just marking the sides where I'm going to be putting a rabbet on the bottom of each of the side pieces, and that's so that the side's going to look like one solid piece and you won't see where I'm going to be attaching the bottom slats to it. I'm measuring the wood. It's 3/4 of an inch approximately, and just checking out the different bits or bearings I have to put on my rabbet bit. So I'm changing this one here to get a 1/2 inch rabbet into the piece of wood. I went through some whole drama of losing a screw, taking my router apart, and then having to put it back together, but it all worked out in the end. Once I had the router back together, I did a couple of test cuts, and I came to find out that my router bit, the biggest rabbet or deepest rabbet I could make, was only a 1/2 inch, and since my boards are 3/4 of an inch, I went ahead and took them over to the planer where I could make them a 1/2 inch. If you don't have a planer or a trim router, you can still make this convertible drink tray just with a few minor adjustments in how you attach the bottom to the piece. But since I have the tools, I'm just going to make mine a little extra special. Oh, and you know who else is extra special? That's right, Awesome Oscar's in the shop with me today. All right, with those boards at 1/2 inch, they will fit into that rabbet perfectly. So it's time to put the rabbets on the rest of the boards. So you'll see me here, I'll do one pass, and then I'll have to change my clamps that are holding them and go back over on the other edge. I also did this in 2 separate passes to get the ultimate depth that I wanted. So I only took about 1/8 of an inch the first pass, and then 1/8 of an inch the second pass, for a total of 1/4 of an inch, or half the width of the board. And since I put the rabbets in it, we can't do typical butt joints because you'll see the rabbet on the edges. So we're going to go ahead and miter the corners. So I'm getting my miter saw set up at a 45-degree angle. I've got my boards marked in the direction that I want those to go. You can either flip those right side up or the opposite way to get the correct angle without having to change your saw. And then I'll go ahead and get those cut. After a test fit, I used the board's exact width to mark where I wanted the other miters to go. So I'm using their width, marking a line, and then putting the direction that I want the miter to be cut in. And then back to the miter saw to get those cut. Then next is to cut the length on those longer boards, and to make sure I get the exact length on both boards when I'm cutting those miters, I just like to not use a measuring tape and line them up and mark them where they need to go, and I find that to be a lot easier. And with everything marked and arranged, we're going to take it back to the miter saw for a couple more cuts. With everything cut, test fit all 4 sides together, and then I'm going to be using my Pony Jorgensen, I think it's a framing clamp is what it's called, but it's really cool. It has these 4 corner pieces, and then you have a screw handle to tighten everything down. So it's really nice for frames, or in this case, my drink tray. After the test clamp, I went ahead and loosened it and started adding some glue. I am using a waterproof glue that's exterior rated. Just make sure it covers all the edges. And slowly tighten it up and make sure that the clamp's in the middle so we get equal pressure from all 4 corners. Then to ensure it was square, I checked it with one of my speed squares and then measured diagonally across to make sure it was right. Then next, I took some measurements for the internal slats and back to the miter saw to get those cut. Then I did a test fit to make sure everything was going to fit in there. Got them all placed in there. I didn't want to have to rip one of the boards, and I figured having a little gap in between them would be good for the outdoors. So we're going to do that. But first we got to take them back to the planer and get them down to the 1/2 inch like the rest of the boards are. After one more test fit, it's time to add some glue and get this thing put together. I did end up adding one clamp in the middle just to make sure everything was tight and snug. And then the very next day, once everything was dry, I took everything out of the clamps and we have a super cool tray. The mitered edges even came together really nice, and after a little bit of sanding, you won't even be able to see the gap. Alright, so far the tray is looking awesome, but let's make it super special and put some legs on it. I just took some scrap of the 1/2 inch cedar and ripped it down to 1.5 inch strips and then cut those down into 6 inch pieces. So I have 4 of them. And I want to put them on the side here so they can act as a handle or a leg in either direction for the tray. So I'm just marking the center of each of the boards and in 1.5 inches so it can pivot on that spot on both the tray and the legs. Then I went ahead and pre-drilled the holes on the legs. I started with a smaller drill bit and then ended up with a 1/4 inch drill bit because I'm going to be using 1/4 inch stainless steel bolts to attach them. Then over at the tray, I went ahead and repeated the process, marked where I wanted my holes, and then used this Craig drill guide to make sure that my holes were straight up and down when I was drilling. And then I went ahead and attached the bolts using washers. Everything is stainless steel, but you will notice here my washers are a little bit bigger and my screws a little long. I do adjust that towards the end. And then go ahead and repeat the process on where the other legs go. Then let's test the legs in all 3 positions. Standing up with a tray, standing down, and then in just as a handle on a tray.
All right guys, now that the tray is built, it's time to put some finish on it. I did make this out of cedar, so cedar is really good for outside, but I want to make sure this thing lasts a long time. So I'm going to put some Cabot wood stain on it. It's a semi-transparent stain, so it's going to enhance the grain and add a little bit of color that's going to look great with my floating deck.
First step with staining is we want to make sure that the area is clean and that there's no more dust left on the piece after sanding. Then I went ahead and removed the legs because it's going to be easier to stain them without them on there. For this project, I decided to go with Cabot's Pewter Gray in a semi-transparent sheen. I think it'll go great with my decking. Give it a nice stir to make sure everything is mixed up. And then I'm going to be applying mine with a bristle brush. Just because there's a lot of nooks and crannies in here, this will make it easier for me. But you can apply it with a rag. And I applied it in sections and then wiped off any excess as I went. Oh, and did I mention that this stain is a stain and sealer in one? So it's a one-step process. Once the inside was done, just flipped it over and repeated on the back side. With staining done, the only thing we need to do is put it back together. So here's a closer look at the hardware that I'm using. Again, it's all stainless steel. I ended up going with those smaller screws and smaller washers. And now it's time to enjoy my new spot with my new drink tray. Big thanks to Cabot for challenging me to make a workspace for their outdoor trend of the year. My convertible drink tray is perfect for checking emails, playing games with the nieces and nephews, or just enjoying drinks with friends. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to my channel so you don't miss my next awesome build. Oh, and remember, build loud, build wild, and have an awesome day.